Hi, hello. Thank you for joining. We're going to be spending some time together, so I thought it might be helpful for you to know who I am and how I think. The best way to do that is to share my personal mission statement. My mission is to make the most of my time, energy, and resources to live a creative and curious life doing interesting things with interesting people. And one more thing I should share with you. My name is Jen, and I am a cookbook addict. I have over 1,000 vintage and contemporary cookbooks in my collection. I love cookbooks. They are a combination of two of my favorite things, food and design. I've always loved food and cooking. Here's a photo of me with my sisters baking Christmas cookies. That's me in the center. I've also always loved making things. This is a book I made when I was 11 years old called Someday. It's 11-year-old Jen's bucket list. I'll share a few highlights with you. Someday, I will have my own cat. I was very specific with my wording. This is a drawing of my childhood cat, Heidi. So we had a cat, but technically she was my sister's, and I wanted my own cat. Now I have 3 of my own. Someday, I would like to meet Bill Cosby. This one is a bit outdated and officially off my bucket list. Someday, I will be out of school. I was never a big fan of school, especially college. I just wanted to be out in the real world. Needless to say, I did not go to graduate school. Someday, I will die. I was embracing the Stoic concept of memento mori before I even knew what it was. And then there's these. Someday, I will be a commercial artist. And someday, I will own my own advertising company. Fast forward 15 years. In 2002, I started Kite Math with Chris Jennings, my business partner and husband. 20 years later, still working together and still running Kite Math. One other thing from the Someday book. Someday, I will marry. And we did. In 2007, Chris and I got married, and that's how we met Christine Sikowski and Josh Culp from Sunday Dinner Club. They catered our wedding in exchange for design services, and we had the best food I have ever had at a wedding. Josh and Christine started Sunday Dinner Club in 2005. The dinners were communal seating, multi-course meals, hosted in their homes, and not just on Sundays. It grew into a community and email list of over 10,000 fans with a dedicated clubhouse space. It was our favorite restaurant. In 2011, they were doing a series of dinners to promote the release of a cookbook they were featured in called Chicago Homegrown. And I said, wouldn't it be cool to do a mini cookbook that doubled as the menu? Guests could take them home as a memento? And Josh and Christine said, sure, go for it. So we created what we refer to as the Brown Book. We included recipes for all the dishes served at the dinner. We worked with an awesome food photographer, Brendan Leakin. We used Sunday Dinner sous chef Amy Hoover's quirky handwriting. It was digitally printed on an HP Indigo and 3-hole pamphlet stitched by us. We used Nina S. textured espresso cover stock to mimic the dark brown wood of the Sunday dinner tables. And we had a great time and a lot of fun. And we were done with the project. Then we found out that the next dinner was going to be short ribs. And Chris said, wouldn't it be cool? And now we know that when we start a sentence with this, it always turns into something. He said, you know the diagram of cow with the different cuts of meat? What if we use that, but we put the menu courses in the different cuts? And that's how we ended up doing the second menu. We had a show card proof press, and we had a photopolymer plate made, and we letterpress printed the menus on Nina suede text cover. And then we made a brand with the SDC initials, heated it up with a blowtorch, and literally branded each menu. Because wouldn't that be cool? So now we are hooked. We kept thinking of ideas, and the menu project was born. For 5 years, we designed and produced over 100 different custom menus, and I'll take you behind the scenes of some of my favorites. But before I dive into the details, I want to give a big shout out to Kelly Allison, the Chicago-based photographer that we worked with. She has an amazing studio, a crazy cool collection of props, and she's super talented. All of the menus that you are about to see were photographed by Kelly. Let's start with another meat-centric menu, big steak. Here's how the brainstorming went. Okay, guys, the menu is big steak. Any ideas? How about a big cartoon-style Flintstone-esque steak? And we could stick a fork in it. Sure, why not? The first two menus I showed were anomalies. The brown book was printed professionally, and we letterpress printed the short rib menu. But the majority of the menus were printed in-house on our Xerox Phaser 7800, which is a toner-based laser printer. The other piece of equipment we could not have done without is a Silhouette Cameo electronic cutter. It's typically used in the crafting, scrapbooking world, but once they released software that allowed us to send files from Illustrator directly to the Cameo, that was a game changer. This allowed us to die cut small runs in-house. For this menu, we used it to cut the steaks and the fork holes. Another printer that we used very sparingly was our Epson Inkjet Stylus Pro. We used it to print these Valentine's Day menu paint swatches. We wanted to mimic the look and feel of your standard hardware store paint swatches, and the Epson prints a very even, very smooth color, and it was perfect for this. Speaking of swatches, we took inspiration from Pantone fan decks and created a conceptual, deconstructed burger out of different paper stocks and colors and a corrugated cardboard patty. One of our go-to paper sources was, you guessed it, PaperSource. The color paper ingredients for the burger swatch book were from PaperSource, and we also got more mileage out of that brand. Burgers were a recurring dinner menu item, and we came up with a lot of different options over the years. We dubbed this one the Burger Stoplight menu. We designed panels of circular photographic ingredients that, when folded, created a complete stacked burger. But when open, it's a visual display of the individual components. Our primary source for paper was Glodden.com. They carry most of the big mills, and you can order smaller quantities, a variety of stock sizes, and they will custom cut sizes. This menu is printed on 12 by 36-inch paper. This is one where the Xerox really shined because it can print on paper up to 48 inches long, and scale was part of the impact of this menu. We also played with scale when we created supersized playing card menus. This was the first and probably only time in my career that I used glossy linen cardstock. Since the beginning, starting with the brown book, we numbered the menus and editions. Usually we simply handwrote the number in the corner, but sometimes we took it to a whole other level. For the pig dinner, we purchased sequentially numbered livestock tags to hold together the menu components and also number the series. But we only found out after we ordered the tags, and days before the first dinner, that they required a special tool to apply. So now we have a tool to attach livestock tags. And speaking of tools, classic food in Jewish culture is the matzo cracker. And they're square, like menus, and they're perforated. So that's how we ended up buying a perforator. We started considering texture as part of the menus, like the perforation in the matzo cracker. For the street food menu, we printed the menus on newsprint and crumpled up each one like trash. We wanted that tactile sensation from both the newsprint paper and the wrinkles from crumpling them. The champagne bubbles menu was super tactile. Each menu was backed with bubble wrap. But what we didn't expect was the auditory component of guests popping the bubble wrap during dinner. The only intentionally auditory menu we created were the vegetable seed packets. We included actual seeds in the envelopes. The sound from shaking the seeds in the packet was an unexpected and fun surprise for the guests. We started using different materials for menus, not just paper. For this burger menu, we created a heart-shaped burger patch to communicate our deep love of burgers. We felt like pizza naturally lent itself to the patch format. It's already a circle with a built-in crust from the patch edge. We added some toppings that secretly spell pizza and had ourselves another patch menu. We played with dimensionality. Who said menus have to be flat or even obvious? We incorporated the Italian dinner menu into a tomato can label design. We put the courses where the nutritional info would go and listed the vendors as ingredients. Most of the dinner series were anywhere from 3 to 6 dinners with 24 to 30 guests. The editions were, on average, 120 to 150 menus. The Pitchfork Music Festival dinners were small, single-date dinners to celebrate the wrap-up of the event. This afforded us the opportunity to dream up more complex and time-consuming menus, since we only needed to produce an edition of 30. This menu took the form of a classic 45 record. There were 3 different colorways. We die-cut the record and the sleeve on the cameo, and the color stripes of the record peeked through the die-cut Pitchfork flags on the sleeve. Another Pitchfork menu also took a cue from the flags that were on the stages at Pitchfork. We shrunk them down to tiny table-sized versions and strung them across each guest's place setting, which was the perfect way to set the stage for the dinner experience. New Year's Eve was another chance to push the creative envelope. As you pulled down the tab on the menu, it counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the holographic ball and confetti dropped. We played a lot with guest interactivity. This was another New Year's Eve menu. Upon arrival, every guest was photographed with a Polaroid camera. Each menu featured a space for them to affix their photo and complete the menu, thus creating a keepsake to remember the night. The Carnival menu also had a guest interactive component. Each ticket was individually numbered and guests were entered into a raffle. This was also a really fun one to make with bright color papers, perforation, and hole punching, and they looked pretty convincing. At some point, we started to really push the guest interaction and created what we called centerpiece menus. Instead of the menu already being placed at each guest's seat, they were invited to take their menu from the center of the table. As the guests arrived, they grabbed a slice of their menu: paper pizzas with custom-cut toppings, paper cheese and sauce, and cardboard crust. The Thai lantern menu was by far the most complicated menu we did. It was lined with gold embossed paper, cut out on the cameo, folded and glued. Then we used a cordless drill to make braided wire by hand and added a wire hanger to each one. As guests entered the dining room, they were greeted by ornamental vase centerpieces, and the menu lanterns were hanging from the flowering branches for each guest to take. In 2017, we designed and published a limited edition book to showcase 40 of our favorite menus. The book was digitally printed on an HP Indigo by O'Neill Printing in Phoenix, Arizona, and bound by Roswell Bookbinding, also in Phoenix, with an exposed Smith sewn binding. It's 100 pages, printed on Mohawk Options smooth 65-pound cover, typeset in All Right Sans, designed by Jackson Kavanaugh of OK Type. The cover is Gamund Savannah Bubinga paper that mimics the dark wood texture of the dining room tables, and it was mounted to Strathmore mahogany 160-pound double thick cover. The cover layout was a designer place setting complete with utensils that were printed in UV white on a Fuji Acuity press. We die cut a circle to reveal the plate that is printed on the inside front cover. The end sheets are Mohawk Chromolux High White to create that high gloss ceramic plate look and feel. And of course, just like the menus, we wanted the book to be special, an experience rather than simply an object. So we included 5 embellishments that we add by hand to each book. The first thing that came to our mind when we brainstormed the American Chinese menu was lamination. And maybe that's because we wanted an excuse to buy a laminator. Each guest menu is laminated, and in the book we simulate lamination with a clear, glossy label placed on top of the printed menu photo. Sunday Dinner Club did a lot of wine pairing dinners. This winemaker's labels had an ethereal, dreamy feel to them, and we evoked that same feeling in the menus. We printed black and white photos on craft paper, and we hand-colored silver and white elements. To finish the menus, we edged them with copper tape for a tactile feel and aged look. In the book, we add a strip of copper tape to the spread. They also did cocktail pairing dinners. We created 3-dimensional cubes out of strips of paper that we scored, folded, and assembled. For one of the series, we used pale blue translucent vellum paper and placed the cubes in ice buckets that had lights in the bottom which made the cubes glow. Another version used shimmery Mohawk Curious Metallics paper in ice silver. The menus were placed in rocks glasses at each guest's place setting. For the book, we designed a pop-up cube using the same Curious paper. This required just a little bit of pre-planning. Actually, a lot. The pages on either side of the pop-up needed to be thick enough, heavy enough, to make the structure work when you opened it. So we glued together the 2 pages before and the 2 pages after the pop-up, which conveniently let us create a pocket for the vegetable menu. At the vegetable dinner, each table featured a planter box with corrugated cardboard dirt and watercolor vegetable menus that each guest got to pick when they arrived. The book features 3 vegetables in the planter box pocket. And a little fun fact, the oversized playing card menu that I showed you earlier is one of the hidden menus that ends up being glued together so you won't see it in the book. But we did that. We printed menus on both of the hidden spreads as kind of a fail-safe. If the cubes ended up being way too much work and we didn't want to include them, the book would still work without the pop-up. It did end up being a ton of work, but we include them anyway. And I saved one of the best for last. This is my favorite menu, the spaghetti menu. It's so simple, and it was so much fun to create. I remember putting these together and thinking, how cool is it that part of my job is sewing spaghetti? And it's surprising how much experimentation went into getting the right pattern so the yarn spaghetti looked natural. In 2016, 3 of these embellished book menus, the spaghetti, ice cube, and vegetable box, along with the pitchfork and tie lantern menus, were included in the unfolded exhibit at the Chicago Design Museum. 100+ menus, 5 years, a book, and a museum show. What did I learn? What did I get out of this experience? My biggest takeaway from the menu project is this: create your own opportunities. Josh and Christine wanted to cook really good restaurant-level food in a casual community setting for people who would enjoy and appreciate it, so they started Sunday Dinner Club. I wanted to design a cookbook, so we created the first menu. Then we wanted to keep serving guests creative and memorable menus, so we did the menu project. If the project you want to do doesn't exist, create it. If there is someone you want to collaborate with, ask. If there is something you want to learn or explore, make up a reason to do it. And don't say no to yourself. We often stop ourselves before we even get started by making all sorts of assumptions. I can't do it. It will be too hard. They won't be interested. They won't let me. I don't have enough talent, experience, time, whatever it is. Other people might say no, but don't say no to yourself first. Show up consistently. The menu project wouldn't be nearly as interesting if it were 5 or a dozen menus. Its impact and what we got out of it, what we learned from it, was because we did it for 5 years. Every month, every menu. But accountability is also key. We weren't being paid to do the menus, so we didn't have money or clients or a boss to keep us motivated. But we were accountable to Josh and Christine and to the Sunday dinner guests. Accountability helps immensely with self-discipline and consistency. So bake in some accountability. And finally, practice non-attachment. I touched on Stoicism in the beginning of the presentation. Now I'm going to sprinkle in a little Buddhism. There are a lot of interpretations of the concept of non-attachment. This is what I mean by it in the context of this project. Engagement in the experience with flexibility and without fixation on achieving specified outcomes. Other ways of saying this: walk the path. Don't put the cart before the horse. Don't get ahead of yourself. Do it for the process. Sunday dinner started as cooking for friends and family on Sunday nights in their apartments. Josh and Christine didn't know it would grow into the community and business that it did. When we started the menu project, we didn't know we'd make a book out of it or it would be in a museum exhibit. We let it unfold and evolve. We created a project, we asked for what we wanted, we showed up consistently, and made the menus. There is excitement and freedom in doing something without necessarily knowing the results. This fosters wonder, curiosity, and joy. It allows you to stay present in the process and enjoy the journey. To circle way back to the very beginning of this presentation, I shared my mission. But what I didn't share with you is that I only wrote that mission a few years ago. I wrote it after the menu project. I only got to this mission because I went through the process. And the lessons I shared with you just now, I didn't have them in the back of my mind 5 years ago or even 5 months ago. They came about from the process of reflection and putting together this presentation. So, am I following my own advice? Am I living my mission? The menu project and book wrapped up, but my love of art, food, and design, and paper didn't go away. And I'm a project person. I need a project. So I launched Makeist. At its core, Makeist is about making and sharing. It's making art, making food, making connections, sharing ideas, sharing recipes, sharing my journey and my process. I am exploring the intersection of art, food, and design. Every week, in an email newsletter, I share 3 things I am making, loving, and thinking about. Right now, it's a newsletter and a website, but I'm not holding on too tightly. I'm open to possibilities and wherever this may lead. If I can be creative and curious, work on interesting projects and collaborations, and meet interesting people along the way, I will consider that success. The end.